Hounds of Love, Kate Bush, says Hobo Star. Yeah, so many albums to talk about. Before we move to our next guest, before we talk about what is going on at the heart of this government and why we should all absolutely shun Keir Starmer and all of his mates if they ever want to go down the pub with you. Let's talk about Plank of the Day, because there is only one today. So far this week, we've had Prince Harry, we've had Brooklyn Beckham, we've had Nepo babies all over the place. Today, we haven't got so much of a Nepo baby as just a complete and utter plank. Let's go with Plank of the Day.
Hello, it's Plank of the Day time.
Now, I don't know whether you saw Emmanuel Macron yesterday, but he stood up to his full height of 3'9½", and was wearing a pair of sunglasses, as if he was auditioning for a part in the next movie with Tom Cruise, you know, Top Gun, or in his case, a top twat. Sorry, I shouldn't say that, that's a bad word. Why is he wearing sunglasses? The first thought we had, and Charlotte, our producer who sets up an awful lot of the show guests and does a lot of the graphics for us as well, and is an essential part of our team, she said, has he been beaten up by his husband again? And I mean, I can't say whether he has a husband. I can say that his wife, Emmanuel Macron, Mrs. Emmanuel Macron, has won a lawsuit recently in which she was accused of being a bloke, and a judge in France made a load of people in America and a load of people who had written about it online to say that they had to pay her a bucket load of money because she's clearly not a bloke. I have no idea whether she's a bloke or not, and it doesn't really interest me. I don't think she is a bloke. I think Emmanuel Macron's wife is just a bit of a weird woman. Because let's face it, Emmanuel Macron, who's the president of France, went out with her when she was his tutor. Now, we've all been there, right? As a teenager, as a teenage boy of 15 or 16, I used to think it was quite cool to fancy your teacher. But you don't marry them, do you? I mean, you know, once you start going out with girls your own age, once you start taking them out to the pub, going to the cinema, you know, taking them home to their parents and introducing yourself to them and trying to make out that you've got honourable intentions while all the time you're trying to have very dishonourable intentions. What you don't do is go, I'll tell you what, you're 20 years older than me and a grown woman with a job and a house and a car and possibly a husband, let's have an affair. No. You just don't do that. Emmanuel Macron is not only a plank for doing that, but he's also a plank for trying to sort of rattle the sabre about Donald Trump. Because one of the things that he did yesterday was he tried to get all sort of hard. And one of the things that he's done in recent days is to show himself walking around the sort of military complex. He did a video the other day of him walking into a group of men who were clearly military men wearing uniforms, and behind him, as he sort of emerged out of this hangar, was what can only be described as a Mirage jet, which is, of course, one of the very, very well-produced and very cleverly put together fighter jets that the French have. They used them, of course, during the Falklands War. They gave them to Argentina, and Argentina used to send Exocet missiles from these planes because they bought them from France, which wasn't very friendly of France, really, to be honest. But anyway, the point is, at the end of the day, Emmanuel Macron is not in any way, shape or form capable of taking on the United States of America. France is not in any way, shape or form capable of taking on the United States of America. You might remember when the American government, I think it was under, was it possibly under Ronald Reagan or George Bush, when they decided to bomb Tripoli and bomb Libya and to remove Colonel Gaddafi. It might have been Clinton, actually. The French said, you can't fly over our airspace. So RAF Lakenheath, which is where the American jets took off from, had to fly down the coast of France and then sort of make a left somewhere over Spain, which made their journey slightly longer because they couldn't fly over French airspace because the French said, we don't want to be any part of bombing Libya. So they're not really great allies of NATO at all. And basically what Macron has said about Donald Trump is that we should not be bullied by people who are trying to be in charge of us. And that really, to me, shows you that France is not a team player. The French are not team players. The French could do all sorts of things for us if they wanted to. For example, they could stop the boats from leaving the French shores, right? Couldn't they? Emmanuel Macron could order the French gendarmerie to puncture every single dinghy as soon as it gets blown up. They could puncture every single dinghy as it was put onto the beach. They could take all of the people out of dinghies as soon as they got in them, in French waters, while they're in the shallows and arrest them all. They could do all of that. They don't do it. They don't do it because they don't want to, because they don't care about leaving migrants to go to Britain, because they want them to leave. They don't want them to stay in France because nobody wants them there. But Emmanuel Macron is the very furthest away person, I think, who should be calling Donald Trump out for whatever it is that he thinks is new colonialism, right? Do we have a clip of Macron, or do we have a picture of him with the sunglasses on? Oh, we've got a picture of Trump talking to him. Oh, let's have Trump talking to him. Let's go.
Yeah, right behind.
Thank you, Mr. President. How would you characterize your relationship with Emmanuel Macron and Keir Starmer right now? And have you spoken to them since your Truth Social post last
No, I
night?
haven't, but I think I get along very well with them. I mean, they always treat me well. They get a little bit rough when they're, when I'm not around. But when I'm around, they treat me very nicely. And, I like both of them. They're both liberal. They've got to straighten out their countries. You can't, London is having a lot of problems. And if you look at Paris, got a lot of problems. They have two problems: immigration and energy.
Donald Trump there talking last night at the inaugural press conference, in which he was celebrating 1 year in office, because basically he got in for his second term a year ago. Here's what Emmanuel Macron said. He called for the rejection of the US's new colonialism. He led calls for the European Union to use its toughest economic response to Trump's threat of tariffs. He says, we're shifting towards a world without rules, where international rule is trampled underfoot and where the only law that seems to matter is that of the strongest. The other thing that Emmanuel Macron, of course, has done is that private texts between him and Donald Trump have been released, where Macron basically asked him if he would go out for dinner with him in Paris after they meet in Davos later on today. Trump's going to Davos later on today. Keir Starmer's not going to Davos, by the way, mainly because he doesn't want to be overshadowed by Nigel Farage, who is going to Davos and who is going to speak to Donald Trump and who is going to have an audience with the President of the United States of America, as if he was, in fact, the deputy or the de facto Prime Minister of this country, which is indeed what he should be. Keir Starmer's not a Prime Minister. Keir Starmer's not a leader. I wouldn't put him in charge of a sausage shop, because he wouldn't know the difference between sausages and hostages, for a start. But there we are. So, plank of the day, Emmanuel Macron. Thank you very much indeed. Let's have the little...
Hello, it's plank of the day time.
Now, there we are. See, that is the wonder of the way that we can now do things, right? We've got so many great clips to play you. It's National Hug Day. We've been talking about the best female album ever. We've also, by the way, we've got what can only be described as a poll out there. If you go onto our YouTube channel, you'll be able to vote in it as to who it is that you want to hug the least or want to hug the most.